Welcome back. In a previous presentation, we had talked about the rhetorical moves and steps in a biomedical research paper. In particular, we had talked about the 3 rhetorical moves in introductions. These were the handshake, the discussion of previous work, including identification of any knowledge gap, and finally, the statement of purpose, which was normally to fill the knowledge gap. We had said that if writers stick to the roadmap and if readers are aware of the roadmap, then it's much more likely that the introduction is going to be understood. This is how biomedical texts are organized at a high level. Today, what we want to do is to dig down and look at how we maintain cohesion at the sentence level so that readers and writers stay on track and don't get lost. Now, among the devices that we can use, and these are just a sampling, are conjunctions, conjuncts, anadiplosis, and anaphors. As an example of how conjunctions can be used to improve cohesion, consider these 2 sentences from an actual biomedical text. The author has placed these sentences in sequence, one after the other, because almost certainly they saw some relationship between the contents. Furthermore, they probably expected readers to see the same connection. However, to help the reader out, they might have used a conjunction to bind the 2 sentences together. Like this. And is a very common conjunction. Like other conjunctions, it sits within a sentence, between the 2 things that it joins together. Other common conjunctions are, for example, but and or. Now, in our example, the resulting sentence is grammatically and factually correct, currently at least. But the author has missed the opportunity to highlight an interesting relationship, which may even have been the focus of their writing. One suspects that their meaning and the interest of the reader would have been better served by something such as this. Low back pain is a significant cause of days lost to disability worldwide, and so last year, the National Institutes of Health allocated approximately $80 million to the study of low back pain. When statements of fact such as these are placed together in a single sentence, the author is inclined to assume that the reader or the editor shares their perception of the relationship, and so there's no need to be overt. However, this belief may be misguided, and in any case, the editor may be left wondering if the author truly sees the connections. Within sentences and between sentences, connections between thoughts need to be made explicit. My advice for beginner writers is to look for opportunities to add 1 or 2 more conjunctions than they might normally use, just to give the reader a little extra assistance. Conjuncts function very much like conjunctions, but they are not stuck in one place between the 2 things that they link together. Consider this example from an article in the Journal of the Canadian Chiropractic Association. Therefore acts like a conjunction, but it doesn't need to be in the middle of the sentence. We could just as easily have written this. Now, this is not intended to be an in-depth grammar lesson, and it's not important if you know the difference between a conjunction and a conjunct. The point is that writers should sprinkle these words and phrases into their writing to make sure that readers see the same relationships as they do. Here is another example. The conjunct makes it clear that the second sentence is a further explanation of the information that was given in the first sentence. Here are some other examples that writers might want to consider using. Now, I don't expect anyone to write these down or memorize them, but just be aware that there are lots of words and phrases that the writer could be using to keep the reader on course. All right, let's move on to another device for maintaining cohesion in writing. Anadeplosis. I love that word. Anadeplosis, as shown in this example, is the use of the same word or phrase at the end of one sentence and the beginning of the next. Here is another example lifted from the internet. I'm not sure that I agree with the sentiment, but the reader really gets the impression that laziness is the writer's focus. Here again, you can see how repetition leaves no doubt about the focus of the text. Now, too much anadiplosis is going to become tedious, but as an occasional tactic, among others, it can really help to keep readers on track. Anaphors. Anaphors are almost the opposite of anadiplosis in that anaphors avoid repetition. However, they are still used to tie sentences together. Here is an example from chiropractic and manual therapies showing how an anaphor can tie two sentences together and also avoid repetition of a long phrase or even an entire sentence. Here is an example from BMC Primary Care. Take a moment to read this. What does these variables refer back to? Well, actually, it's hard to know, isn't it? And so this shows what a double-edged sword anaphors can be. They can help, but they can also confuse. Here's another example of the latter. This is a long one, so take a moment to read this. I honestly have no idea what this issue refers to. Do you? This is another example of the familiar situation where the writer just imagines that the reader shares their understanding. Don't get caught in this trap. Writers have to accept that they are imperfect communicators, and others will not share their knowledge base or their point of view. And so, as writers, we have to put more effort into looking at our writing from the reader's point of view. So what have we learned? Well, our advice to writers has to be, do not assume that readers and editors see the logical connections that you see in your own writing. Make connections in successive thoughts explicit through the judicious use of devices such as conjunctions, conjuncts, anadiplosis, and anaphors. Thank you very much.